Hello everybody, welcome back to the course. In the previous video, we learned about the React folder structure, or at least one common folder structure for creating our React apps. We learned about the views directory, the components directory, and we pretty much just learned how to organize our React apps in a way that makes our development experience better. In this video, we are going to learn how to add event listeners to JSX markup. So we're going to learn how to write code that only runs when something happens inside of the React app, such as a button getting clicked or a form being submitted. And this is going to be a fairly brief video because it's a pretty basic concept. And most of our attention is going to be focused on looking at the differences between events in plain HTML and events in JSX. So in the first slide, we can see that we're going to be learning HTML versus JSX events. There are two sections on this little window here. First, we have an example of an HTML inline event, and right here we have a button element with an onClick attribute. And notice that this is in flat case, meaning that all of the letters are lowercase, and then the value is a string value in which we would pass in some JavaScript code. And I personally think it's a little weird to put JavaScript code inside of a string, but that's just how HTML does it. And then inside we just have the text click me, and that is all. Now, right here, highlighted in blue, we have the JSX version of this. And it's practically the same. We have a button tag with an onClick attribute, but this time, onClick is camel cased, meaning that the second word, click, is capitalized. And all of the events in JSX are going to follow this pattern. They are all camel cased. And instead of a string, they all take a JavaScript expression. You may remember from a previous video in the course that to embed a JavaScript expression into JSX markup, we need to use curly braces, as you can see here. So we can see the same information on this right side window, that JSX events are camel case, and the value you pass to a JSX event is a callback function, either defined or anonymous. And if you're wondering what I mean by that, we are going to look at that right now after we go and recreate something very similar to this for a little practice. So let's go ahead and go to Code Sandbox. I'm not using VS Code in this video for the sake of simplicity. And a quick digression is that if you have seen any of my previous videos, you'll know that I am on a Linux operating system. So you may be wondering why I have the macOS icons as well as an Apple logo up in my corner. I am still, in fact, on Ubuntu Linux. It's just that I customized it to look pretty much identical to Mac OS to a certain extent. So if you're confused, that's all that is. I just think it looks better than the default GNOME desktop. So anyway, back to React. So in here, I just generated a default React template on Code Sandbox, and I wonder if I can make this any bigger. Okay, that's a little better. So I'm just going to delete everything inside of this div. So this H2 and this H1. And then inside of it, I'm going to do the same thing we did in the slide, which was create a button. And then inside of it, we're going to add a onClick attribute, which is going to contain a JSX expression. And then I'm just going to close the button and add the text click me, and then close that very quickly. And you'll notice here that on the browser side, I'm getting a type error, and that's because I did not pass a value to the onClick attribute. I just added curly braces to show that a JavaScript expression is going to go there at some point. So now let's go ahead and fix this problem by going to the next slide and seeing how we handle this situation. So the next and final thing we need to look at is event handlers. There are two types. We can use a named function or an anonymous function. And for named functions, there is a convention for naming them where we use the word handle and then the name of the event minus the on part. So in this case, we are creating a onClick event. And so the event handler is called handleClick. So right here, we have an arrow function called handleClick, and all it does is console log the words button clicked. And then in here, inside of the button element, inside of the onClick attribute, all we do is reference the name of that function inside of the curly braces. The second option is to use an anonymous function where we just embed a function expression inside of the curly braces of the event attribute. So right here we have the same thing, just not a named function. We have an arrow function that logs to the console the word clicked. I would have used button clicked, but I ran out of horizontal space here, as you can see. So let's go ahead and do both of these options in Code Sandbox. So outside of the return statement, I'm going to define a function called handleClick. It's going to be an arrow function. And then inside of here, again, we are just going to console log the text button clicked. And then down here inside of the button element, we're going to reference that function handleClick. So now you can see we have a button here on the browser with the text click me. And so I'm going to open the console down here and clear that. We have a bunch of errors in there. And now when we click the button, you can see that it says button clicked right here. So that is the first option for making event handlers. The second one is to just get rid of this arrow function up here, and just inside of the onClick attribute, use an anonymous arrow function just like this. And inside of there, we're going to do the same thing, console.log, button clicked. And that should have the same exact effect. I'm not sure what this is doing here. There we go, that's gone. So now when we click the button, again, we see the text button clicked in the console. We can do it however many times we want. And obviously this is not a very useful button or a very useful event handler. But as we go further in the course and create projects, we are going to learn more useful events that we can use in our React apps. So that is pretty much all there is to events for now. We're of course going to learn more about them, such as the events object, as we go into things like React Forms and other things of that nature. But for now, I think that's enough for one video. So next time we are going to learn about conditional rendering in React/JSX, which is rendering different markup based on a condition. So stay tuned and I will see you in the next one.